just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday and we are already into week 3 of the NFL season. But if you looked at the list of available players for this week, you might think we were already in week 10 of the NFL season. Dennis, in the time you and I have been getting ready to start this show, we probably lost 2 or 3 more players. What do you make of this injury landscape out there?
They're bigger, they're faster, they have less contact. They have less contact in preseason. And I mean, at some point we'll continue to evolve as a species. And so, well, muscles may be developing bigger and stronger, tendons and stuff need to get caught up in their strength, and not to get all sciencey on you. I don't know, man. That you got big people getting hit by bigger people, and stuff's bound to break, man.
Yeah, it has been savage. And when they did the updates today, as we'll discuss as we go through previews, there are a lot of more people that are missing. But we got through last night's game. Felt like we finally have hit mid-peak season Thursday night football too. As
season's over.
24-3 win for the Jets over the Patriots. No major injuries to fantasy relevant players last night, but Dennis, the Patriot offense did not look great. They did end up inserting Drake May for a little while. There's been some call that they should look at going in permanently. Their coach came out today and said Jacoby's still the man. Is that the right decision?
For the health of Drake May? Yep, it is. Like, do you want to put this kid in there? It isn't like he didn't start 60 games in college like Brock Purdy or Bo Nix or whatever the absurd number of college starts they had. He's a good prospect. He needs to learn. He needs to get reps, but they need to be able to block for him. Like, he had a 2.75 YPA last night. He was in for 16 snaps. They threw the ball on 8 of them. He was 4 for 8 for 22 yards, 2.75 yards per attempt. They dropped back 4 other times in which he was sacked or had to scramble. So out of the 16 sacks, they dropped him back 12 times. It was miserable. And it was miserable for Jacoby Brissett. I mean, 18 attempts, only 98 yards passing. Ramondre couldn't get going. He only had 6 carries. Gibson flashed a little bit on his 5 carries, and Gibson, he had 3 targets, caught 3 passes. Nothing in the passing game for Ramondre. The Jets defense played like we've expected them to play most of the year. In part, having an awful offense on the other side of the ball makes it easy for your defense to look good. The Patriots wide receiver group isn't nothing to be worried about. And when you've got DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner out there and the pass rush that the Jets have, it was not a great matchup for New England. But no, I think what you do is you keep rolling Brissett out there. You let Drake get some mop-up time, try to put him in position to build a little bit of confidence as the season goes on. But don't put him out there and let him take a beating. We don't need another David Carr. We've seen that movie. We don't need another shell-shock quarterback.
It hasn't been great for rookie quarterbacks that are starting anywhere, so I don't know why they'd be in a hurry. He has the worst supporting cast too. Meanwhile, the Jets kind of looking like the Jets that we thought we might see with Aaron Rodgers. He's looking more and more comfortable. He had 281 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Tyler Conklin got going. Alan Lazard caught another touchdown. They got Mike Williams going. Garrett Wilson, fortunately, gets a touchdown. Breece Hall and Braylon Allen looking good in the backfield. What do you think of this Jets offense?
It feels like hopefully this is a harbinger for what's going to happen this weekend, and we're going to start to see some offenses on the come up because it's been a pretty slow start. I mean, this game that Aaron Rodgers had last night, he would have been, QB3 last week, and he would have been QB6 in week 1. And it wasn't like he had this amazing game. It was just 2 touchdowns, 268 yards,
81
yards. So it wasn't like he had this super amazing game. He got out, moved a little bit, ran the ball 3 times for 18 yards. But he said it best in the post game when he said, "Hey, when Five and I get on the same page, this is going to be something." He recognizes that, he's got a comfort level with Alan Lazard, that Alan Lazard is nowhere near as talented as Garrett Wilson. And they found I don't know if found is the right word, but they realize they've got quite the good second string running back in Braylon Allen, and they can now put him in trust situations to spell Breece Hall. And several times last night, they had Hall and Allen both in the game. Breece Hall is an exceptionally good pass catcher as well. So it's like they've got confidence in this 20-year-old running back who's this big 240-pound bruiser with good speed and can pick up pass protection and catch the ball a little bit himself. If this offense gets to clicking, it might be like it might put up some real big points. Probably the biggest frustration I had with it is that I forgot to put Tyler Conklin in my Scott Fishbowl lineup.
Well, you're hopeful we're going to see some more offense. I'm going to tell you, I've looked at some of these games. I think we're going to have quite a few low-scoring defensive affairs. We will kick that off with one that I think could be pretty low-scoring. Man, I sometimes am a little dyslexic putting in the records. The Giants are not 2-0. They are 0-2. The New York Giants 0-2 at the 1-1 Cleveland Browns. Dennis, 95 yards last week for Devin Singletary. He seems to be getting pretty much 90 to 95% of the volume back there as a running back. How do you like him as a fantasy play?
I like him good. I'm trying to see. I put. Let me find my notes. Seems like I closed my my sheet out. I'll let you riff for a second while I find what I did with my stuff.
Yeah,
I like when I do that.
I mean, Singletary. I liked him going back to being with Brian Daboll anyway. And they don't have a ton behind him. Tracy was banged up coming into the season. I thought they'd have a few more opportunities for Eric Gray, but last week I think Tracy only had 1 carry. The rest all went to him because most of Daniel Jones' runs are running for his life and not really designed runs.
Yeah, it's I'm almost there. Where did my stuff go?
You're gonna have to wing it.
Oh, I found it. Forgot what I named it. And I screwed myself up by typing my notes from last night's game in on the regular show sheet instead of my note sheet. All right, so how am I feeling about Devin Singletary, who's RB25 after 2 weeks? I mean, it's kind of about what we had hoped for him. I mean, I don't think we expected him to be like a rock star. It isn't like he has a ton of competition. Cleveland's got a pretty stout defense versus the run and the pass. They're bottom half in the league in fantasy points given up to running backs, in fantasy points to running backs, yards to running backs, receptions to running backs, and receiving yards to running backs. So it doesn't seem to bode well for Devin Singletary to be much better than that RB25. They're just slightly worse versus the pass, but they're playing Daniel Jones. So it feels like the Giants are going to struggle to put up points in this game.
On the other side, the Giants have been pretty porous on defense, especially against the pass. The Browns picked up the pass offense a little bit in week 2, but Amari Cooper, despite 17 targets, only has 5 receptions. And Njoku out again. Do you think they can get him going?
So Cooper's got 3 drops in 2 games. He had 5 drops all of last year. But according to PFF, only 62.5% of Cooper's targets have been deemed catchable. So Deshaun Watson's got to step up and do his part. I like Cooper to continue. He's a good wide receiver. He's not elite. He's a very good wide receiver. I think from a talent perspective, he's better than Jerry Jeudy and he's better than Elijah Moore, and that's going to bear out over the course of the season. However, early in the season, Moore and Jeudy are playing pretty good, and with a questionable running game with Foreman and Ford, and then no David Njoku, it looks like it'll come down to Cooper, Jeudy, and Moore. So I'm comfortable starting. I'm probably comfortable starting Cooper as a wide receiver 3, Jeudy as a flex, and if I'm starting Moore, it's because it's a plug and pray kind of thing.
I'm not starting Jeudy out of spite, but I am taking the Browns.
I'm taking the Browns as well.
Next up, we have the Green Bay Packers 1-1 at the 0-2 Tennessee Titans. Dennis, it seems like the Packers game plan with Malik Willis in there, and he probably is going to be in there. That I know Jordan Love has gotten in some practices, but more likely in week 4. The game plan with Willis has seemed to be run heavy and pass when they need to. What does that mean for Packers receivers?
They've got a prayer circle going with a Jordan Love doll in the middle of it, trying to facilitate his knee getting better as fast as it possibly can.
No, but you still don't want to throw him out there and have it get.
Oh, no, definitely not. Like LaFleur is playing gamesmanship this week with Jordan Love. I don't think he's going to be active. Not just that he won't play. He's not going to be active. They're going to play very conservative with Willis, and 15 to 20 pass attempts, I think, is probably in the realm of possibility. Willis wants to play well to show Tennessee, hey, you shouldn't have let me go. But LaFleur's not going to get super wrapped up in that. They're going to grind it out with Josh Jacobs. They're going to throw the ball a few times. I think on Tuesday I said Willis had he didn't throw for a lot of yards, but he had 3 pass completions, I think a 17, a 19, and a 32-yarder or something like that. Probably some run after the catch involved with some of those. But if the team's going to make plays for him, then I think that they feel comfortable playing a close game, especially against Tennessee, which I don't think is a murderer's row of offense right now.
Now, but speaking of that Tennessee offense, we've seen Chigo Okonkwo being kind of involved. The tight end position between the injuries and the guys that just don't seem to be getting targets has been kind of a toss-up. How are you feeling about Chig?
You want to feel good about him, but I don't think the 100% catch rate is sustainable. So he's only caught 5. I think he's caught 5 passes on the year. The Titans are 16th in pass attempts, but only 27th in passing yards. So tight end scoring is down right now. It is we can joke all we want, but since they went to the 17-game season and the 3-game preseason, and so many teams set their starters during the preseason, are virtually, anywhere from 90% to 100% of the preseason. It just takes a couple games into the season for teams to get going. So tight end scoring is down, with only 3 teams giving up double-digit fantasy points to tight ends through 2 games. Chig Okonkwo is an athletic tight end, and we've seen him flash before. He's one of those, 10 to 20 guys, tight end 10 to tight end 20 guys that in any given week can finish as tight end 7 for you. And any given week could be tight end 24. It's just he's a great guy to have in a rebuild, because if he plays well, you could probably move him for some draft capital. And if he doesn't, it's going to help your draft capital that you already have.
I am taking the Packers in this one.
So am I, and I'm taking the Packers. I don't know what the over/under is, but I'm probably going to take the under.
Yeah. We got a question. Full PPR, need a wide receiver and a flex. Chris Godwin, Chris Olave, and James Conner. I'm taking both Chris's. Godwin against the Broncos, Olave, and what I figure will be a high-scoring game against the Eagles. I would sit Conner, who has the Detroit front. And Detroit's secondary not as good, but their front has been not too bad.
Yeah, and Godwin is excelling in that Cooper Kupp role.
He's playing Denver. That's all you need to know.
What's that?
He's playing Denver. That's all you need.
And then Chris Olave, my Ohio State Scarlet and Gray glasses want to say he was robbed of that touchdown last week, but he was down at the half-yard line. They should have went back to him and let him get the touchdown. But I understand you got Alvin Kamara and you got a quarterback sneak available. But Olave's coming along just fine.
Next up, we have the 1-1 Chicago Bears at the 0-2 Indianapolis Colts. Dennis, Caleb Williams has struggled mightily in the first 2 games, less than 300 yards passing total. What can they do to get him going in Indianapolis?
Can they get him going? Optimistically, I'm going to say yes. But they're giving up the 3rd highest pressure rate in the NFL. And so he's going to need to kind of figure out, if I'm going to be getting this pressure up the middle, what can I do? Keenan Allen's going to be out this week, but Rome Odunze's back. They're going to go double tight end with Kmet and Gerald Everett. If so, that could allow for some short area passing targets. If he's going to be getting that pressure, he can get the ball quick. Hopefully he's realized after a couple games that, hey, some of these plays I was making the last couple of years at USC, these linemen here and linebackers here in the NFL are a little bigger, a little faster, and I'm not able to make those plays. So let me make plays with my brain. And I think it's still there's going to be growing pains. Indianapolis is off to a great start, or off to a great start record-wise. But I think Chicago's interior offensive line is struggling. They're giving up a lot of pressure in the middle, and they need to figure that out.
No DeForest Buckner, which could help, and Latu is questionable with a hip injury, has not been practicing, so that could be good news for the Bears. You never know. On the other side, the Colts, they've gotten some receivers going. We've noted Alec Pierce has been good, but Michael Pittman Jr., kind of a quiet couple of games. Now he's struggling through a calf injury. Josh Downs comes back this week to add just another mouth in the mix. How are you feeling about Pittman?
Not great, Bob. I like Pittman's talent. I think he's going to be fine in the long run. But we see that Anthony Pittman's got a lot of growing to do. So Downs is going to come back, and he's going to slide into that slot. You've got probably Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell, who are going to be rotating on the outside some. So it does kind of leave that intermediate area for Michael Pittman to work in. His ADOT right now is really low. His reception yardage, it's just not there. I'd like to see them get him some downfield opportunities, not just Alec Pierce and A.D. Mitchell, but I don't think it's too early to say that Michael Pittman was overdrafted this year based on how Anthony Richardson is playing.
Well, that's the unfortunate thing. He's had really great years, but we've never really seen him with Richardson. They had so few games last year. A lot of what he was doing was with Minshew, who we've seen actually knows what to do with the wide receiver one.
Well, and right now Richardson's sitting on a 3 to 4 touchdown to interception ratio, so he's negative there. He's got to throw the ball to his guys.
I am taking the Colts at home.
I am too. This was one of the games that I switched from my. I've started to note when I make switches from what I did in the preseason picks, so I did switch to the Colts in this one.
2-0 Houston Texans at the 2-0 Minnesota Vikings could be one of the better games of the weekend, but the Texans' backfield is an issue. Dameon Pierce was ruled out. Joe Mixon now downgraded to doubtful. It's looking like Cam Akers and Dare Ogunbowale. What are you doing with that backfield? Are you kind of staying away?
If I can get Akers out, depending on what my other options are, I'm certainly happy to give him a shot in my flex. Akers is a very good athlete, and he's now 2 years away from his, year and a half to 2 years away from his Achilles injury. And
he blew his Achilles again last year.
All right, so he's a year away.
Not even a year.
So but man, he looked good in preseason. And so as we kind of watch, he's the better running back over Dario Ogunbowale. Ogunbowale will play on pass downs. Akers is going to get the running plays. Now, it'll be minimized some because you've got C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. So if they have to throw the ball 55 times, I think they're perfectly fine throwing the ball 55 times with that makeup. But Akers runs in that scheme fairly well. It's less of a see the hole and go to it. He struggles with that. If it's tell him go to this hole, he's going to go to that hole, and he's got enough speed to gain some yardage, and he's got enough size to move the pile. So I'd be okay flexing him based on what my other options are.
Yeah, it looks like the only other running back on that roster is British Brooks. Don't know who's on their practice squad, but I think Akers is going to get a lot of the work. On the flip side, Jordan Addison has been ruled out again. Still no TJ Hawkinson. Justin Jefferson got dinged up a little bit last week, has said he's going to be good to go, appears to be off the injury report. Any concerns about him in this game?
Nope.
That's what I like to hear.
Analysis.
I am going with the Texans in this one.
I am as well.
Next up, we have the 1-1 Philadelphia Eagles at the 2-0 New Orleans Saints. Dennis, no A.J. Brown in this one, already been ruled out. Devonta Smith, their other really good wide receiver, but it is a tough corner matchup with the New Orleans Saints. How are you feeling about Devonta Smith?
I'm gonna keep rolling him out there. We've seen him play good against good defenders. He's a plus route runner. He's got great speed. They're gonna be able to take their shots with him, and with no A.J. Brown, he's gonna get the majority of the targets. Dallas Goedert will get some. Saquon Barkley will pile some targets up. I forget, all I can think of is Johnny Wilson as their other wide receivers, but I don't have their depth chart in front of me.
They have Jahan Dotson, Britton Covey.
That's who I'm missing. But, we saw last week with no A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson got one target. So maybe Dotson, maybe he had to, get comfortable in the offense and learn the offense a little more. Yeah, that's the ticket.
Maybe he did something to Kellen Moore.
I'm going to fire up Devonta Smith. I'm not going to worry about him. His job is to beat whoever's across from him, and he has a history of being able to do that.
Meanwhile, did you know Derek Carr through 2 weeks is QB2 on the fantasy season? Their offense has been rolling. Do you keep rolling with him against the Eagles this week?
You do, but you've got to temper your expectations. There's gonna a stumble is coming. I mean, he has one QB1 finish in his career, and that was QB10 and it was in the first half of his career. I stopped at five years in, but he's typically somewhere between QB14 and QB18. That's where Derek Carr usually finishes. Can he ride it out this year? You know, Chris Olave makes people look good. Rashid Shaheed makes people look good. Alvin Kamara makes people look good. So I think it could happen. That he could have he could have a career year. Is it going to be QB2? Probably not. But it wouldn't surprise me if he was QB8 or 9.
I am going to take the Eagles.
So am I.
Next up, the third of 3 really good games we'd cover in a row. This is the 2-0 Los Angeles Chargers at the 2-0 Pittsburgh Steelers. I also think this game could fall short of the over-under of 35.5 points. That is, they're not asking Justin Herbert to throw the ball a lot, which seems to be good since his ankle is ailing a little bit. Is Justin Herbert still a must-start even in Superflex?
So we expected his passing volume to be down because of the quote-unquote Harbaugh effect and the quote-unquote Greg Roman effect. So we expected that team to rush the ball more. They let their top 2 wide receivers go, and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They didn't really replace them. Now, as it turns out, it seems like Jim Harbaugh stood there in the championship playoffs on the Michigan sideline watching Quentin Johnston catch that one pass and take it for a long distance. And he seems to think he can get some good production out of him, and he is. But the Chargers, they have the 4th fewest pass attempts in the NFL so far this year. And with the resurgence of J.K. Dobbins, who looks phenomenal, warms my heart, and grinding Gus Edwards, you know, they've got a running game. So they are looking to run the ball, hold the ball, have a time of possession edge, then have their wide receivers make plays when they need plays to be made. So it's going to be he's probably your QB2 in the Superflex league, but there may be weeks where you're eking it out to low end QB2.
Yeah, QB is so brutal. I could see a case made for low end QB2, but I'll be honest, in places where I think I've had better options or where I have options with more upside, I've sat him down, especially this week. That Steelers defense is no joke. We saw them take apart Kirk Cousins. We saw them take apart, well, Denver sucks, but we saw them take apart Kirk Cousins. Speaking of the Steelers, the one thing we get excited about when Arthur Smith comes to your team is the running game. Najee Harris getting the carries, has 37, but only 139 yards, obviously no touchdowns. Only 11 carries for Warren, who's been a little dinged up, 49 yards. He has 4 receptions, 2 for Harris. Neither of them have done a whole lot. How are you feeling about those guys for fantasy?
Well, Harris he's sitting at RB 33 right now, and Warren is RB 43. So there's definitely some work to be done as far as how useful they're going to be. Najee had 17 carries last week. He averaged 4.1 yards. What they need is they need to score touchdowns. You can get by on 17 for 70 if you get a touchdown or 2. Harris caught one of his 2 passes for 5 yards. Warren caught both of his passes for 19. Fields needs to throw the ball 30 times for this offense to start taking off. I don't know if we're going to get there
this week,
especially if they're winning. They're gonna play close and they're gonna work. Mike Tomlin has never been a beauty pageant guy, and he's going to be perfectly fine, winning 18-15. 6 field goals to 5 field goals. It's just how he's wired. He wants to play tough, and when they're playing like that, he's going to keep them going, keep them in there, keep their mindset focused on it's us against the world. We got to battle. Nobody trusts us. Nobody likes us. Yeah, it all comes down. They've got to start getting in the end zone. Hopefully, the trend continues from last night. We get a little more offense.
Not in this game, friend. I am taking the Steelers in this one.
So am I.
I think this could be like a 9-6 game that takes 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'm not optimistic. Speaking of bad teams, the 0-2 Denver Broncos are at the 2-0 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Denver, their number one receiver is Courtland Sutton. The good news is he's seen 16 targets. The bad news is he's caught 5 for 64 yards. And I would say, having seen Bo Nix's inability to throw the ball, it's a miracle he's caught 5. But how are you feeling about Courtland Sutton for fantasy?
It's a struggle, man.
It's a struggle to watch.
He's the guy there for whatever it means. Denver has the 3rd most pass attempts, but they're 21st in passing yards. They're last in touchdown passes, but first in interceptions. So what was the criticism of Bo Nix in the draft process? He throws so many passes at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. And, we have Sean Payton, who's like, yeah, I can work with that. We'll have a 75% completion rate with a 1.3 ADOT. It's they need to, I don't know if they need to put Jarrett Stidham in and let him play YOLO ball, because they're just not getting anything done. I don't think Stidham is the answer, but they're not getting anything done right now. So
no, it's brutal. Meanwhile, for the Buccaneers, Rachaad White got banged up a little bit last week and had just a horrific stat line. Could not find any room to run, even though his team won. The Broncos have been kind of a mixed bag. Week 1, they gave up a great rushing day to Ken Walker. Last week, they did a somewhat decent job on Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. How are you feeling about White?
We've been talking since he came into the league about, wow, dude's a really good pass catcher, but a terribly inefficient runner. He's leading the team in running back snaps 70% to 30% over Bucky Irvin, but Irvin is plus that in touches. So it's 63% touches to 37% touches for Irvin. Irvin, well, not great last week. He only carried the ball for a 3.1 yard average on his 7 carries. Rachaad White was 1.8 on his 10. White's a good pass catcher, but he only had 1 target last week. It was all Godwin and Evans pretty much. Baker only threw the ball 19 times against Detroit. I think from a receiving back perspective, White is going to be fine, but he feels like he's going to finish as an RB2 because Irvin is going to cut into the ground game substantially because he's just a better runner of the ball. So White is a phenomenal pass catcher for a running back.
I am taking the Buccaneers.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 0-2 Carolina Panthers at the 1-1 Las Vegas Raiders. Dennis, big change for Carolina. Andy Dalton is coming in. What do you expect to see?
So last year when Dalton came in for the 3rd game of the season, it was weird. They played him 1 game. Now they lost, so maybe that's why Reich went right back to Young. It felt like Young should have sat longer. But he was 34.
Young was out because he was injured, though.
Sure. He was 34 of 58 for 361 yards and 2 touchdowns. They lost 37-27 to Seattle. He targeted 10 different receivers, and the 11 of 14 for 145 and a touchdown to Adam Thielen, 4 for 11 for 86, and a touchdown to DJ Chark, and five receptions on 9 targets for 38 yards for Miles Sanders. We've seen Sanders pop up this year. He's looking a little better than he did last year, and he's playing. He's starting to cut into Chuba Hubbard, even though they've Hubbard had 10 carries, Sanders had 7 last week with 3 targets for Sanders and 5 targets for Hubbard. So they're at about a 60-40 split right now in opportunities. I think Dalton is going to give them a chance. I don't know what the plan is for Bryce Young. He said he didn't see the benching coming. He didn't know it was going to happen. That's a communication issue, but I think, sometimes you got to look around and, be it, maybe you don't say, I didn't see it coming. Maybe you say, well, I wasn't expecting it, but yeah, I see why it could happen based on how I've been playing. I don't have a lot of Bryce Young because I wasn't a believer.
Yeah, which is good.
He's in a situation where they've got a new coaching regime, and they're like, let's see what we can do with Andy Dalton. Whether or not that makes sense, I don't know.
It doesn't.
But who knows? Dalton may play well, and maybe they end up fighting for a playoff spot.
Meanwhile, for the Raiders, Zamir White has started slow. 22 carries for only 68 yards, only has 5 receptions for 16 yards. But teams have been able to run on the Panthers. If not now, when for Zamir White?
I mean, it's got to be now, right? I mean,
you gotta hope.
Carolina gives up the second most fantasy points to running backs. I think White could push for a top 5 finish this week. But they got to give him the ball. And maybe because they're 1-1 and Carolina is not good on either side of the ball, it might be a situation where Antonio Pierce is like, look, we're going to get the ball to Adams and Bowers, and we need to put up some points against this team because they can be had, and we need it to boost our ego, to boost our confidence. And so maybe they throw the ball a little bit more than we expect. But if you're not starting White this week, and if White can't perform against Carolina this week, then I think you throw in the towel on Zamir White.
Yeah, as it is, I have him in RB3 range, but I am taking the Raiders, and I hope they win by a lot.
I'm taking the Raiders as well.
Next up, the 1-1 Miami Dolphins at the 2-0 Seattle Seahawks. Dennis, we know we're getting Skylar Thompson. What does that do for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle?
So Tyreek is at wide receiver 17, and Waddle is wide receiver 28 on the season. When you're a backup and you come into a situation where there's definitely a set of stars, you got to understand what your job is. His job is to get the ball to Hill and Waddle. He's going to have Achane, Jeff Wilson, maybe Mostert's back, maybe Jalen Wright, who did not look good last week.
Mostert likely not going to be playing, they said today.
Mostert?
Yep.
Yeah. So, my concern is that while he says he's holding up fine, Devon Achane had 29 touches last week. That feels high. And for a 5'9", 180-pound running back. So I think we'll get a little bit more Jalen Wright, a little bit more Jeff Wilson this week. And but Skylar Thompson has to know my job is to get the ball to Tyreek and to Waddle. And so I think he's not a great passer, but they run a lot of short, quick routes and let the wide receivers do it with their legs. I'm not looking to start him, and but if you're in a pinch and you need a quarterback, people picked up Malik Willis last week.
I'd rather have Malik Willis, I think. On the flip side, Ken Walker has been downgraded to doubtful, probably means Zach Charbonnet again. He wasn't great in his first start, but Miami allowed teams to run all over him. The Jaguars had two pretty good running days from Etienne and Bigsby in week 1. Last week, James Cook was all over them. So are you feeling more optimistic about Charbonnet?
I think you got to feel a little more optimistic given the opponent. It was interesting. They were very pass heavy last week. Charbonnet had 14 carries, and no other running back carried the ball. No other running back received a target. I would have at least thought that Laviska Shenault would have got a jet sweep or something. But really it was 14 for Charbonnet and five rushes for Geno. I think we could see some Kenny McIntosh here. 4 or 5 carries maybe. Couple passing down opportunities. But Charbonnet's just got to be better.
Yeah. I am going to take the Seahawks in this one.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 0-2 Baltimore Ravens with the 1-1 Dallas Cowboys. A lot of talk has been made that they have not used Derrick Henry enough. Do you think that changes this week?
I think it should. The Cowboys are giving up the most fantasy points to running backs so far this year in the NFL. The one hitch to that is a lot of those points are coming in the receiving game. So I would kind of have Henry more as a low-end RB1, high-end RB2. But I think Justice Hill will be flexible this week.
Meanwhile, for the Dallas Cowboys, we saw last week against this defense, Gardner Minshew had himself a day, throwing a lot up to Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers, Jake Ferguson figuring to be back. But do you think this portends good things for CeeDee Lamb?
It can't hurt, right? He's sitting at wide receiver 17 on the year, and Dak is QB 15 through 2 games. The Ravens have given up the most passing yards in the NFL, but they're kind of middle of the pack in fantasy points. So while they're giving up yards, they're not giving up a lot of touchdowns. Devontae Adams was wide receiver. He was wide receiver 5 versus Dallas, and Rashee Rice was wide receiver 14. Both of them put up real good numbers. So I expect CeeDee Lamb to have a pretty good game.
I am actually taking the Cowboys in this one.
I'm going to take the Ravens, man. I think they're going to go down to Dallas and
get it done.
They need a win.
San Francisco 49ers 1-1 at the 0-2 Los Angeles Rams. Dennis, that passing game has been pretty clarified. Deebo Samuel out and George Kittle now downgraded to doubtful. How you feeling about Brandon Ayuk?
Well, the Rams have been giving up big games to outside wide receivers. See Jameson Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. Can you believe at one point those two guys were in the same receiving room at Ohio State? Jameson Williams was at Ohio State and had to transfer to Alabama because he couldn't get playing time at Ohio State. Anyways, I'm just bragging about Ohio State.
Yeah, and they have all those national. Oh wait,
the Rams have been giving up a lot of big games so far to outside receivers. Losing Aaron Donald as much as they they put some draft capital into the offensive line. I forget who was it, Braswell that they drafted, and then
they took Jared Verse and Braden Fisk.
Yeah, Braden Fisk. So they tried to restock the line, but you're replacing a Hall of Famer, a one-of-one kind of defensive tackle. So they'll get better. I think the challenge for the Rams is going to be that losing as many offensive linemen and premier wide receivers as they have, it's going to be a rough game on the offense. So I think San Francisco gets out to a lead early, and then they grind it with Mason and Garendo.
Yeah, this could be another low-scoring game. The Rams, meanwhile, Cup is out. They have Puka on IR. How are we feeling about Kyron Williams?
Man, it's going to be a tough line of scrimmage with the passing game not producing. They're going to need Jordan Whittington and Tutu Atwell and Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson to do something. Because we saw Darnold and the Vikings play well against San Francisco. Matt Stafford he's a smart quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but he's going to need those wide receivers to produce. I think it's going to be a little bit of rough sledding for Kyron. He's still in line to get a lot of volume. I've got a note here about the Lions. I don't remember why that's on my Rams. Anyways, I think Kyron gets a lot of volume. I just don't think it's going to be super productive.
I am taking the 49ers.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 1-1 Detroit Lions at the 1-1 Arizona Cardinals. Dennis, for Detroit, how are you feeling about Sam Laporta? He's only seen 8 targets so far. He's caught 6 for 58, but a little bit of a slowish start.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to turn around this week either. The Cards are giving up the 10th fewest fantasy points to tight ends and the 11th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think we're going to be looking more at Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams putting up points. And then obviously you've got the running game in Detroit with Gibbs and David Montgomery. So if you have Laporta, hold on. His time is coming. Could he go off against Arizona? Sure. But based on their first couple of weeks of the season, it doesn't seem likely.
Meanwhile, for the Cardinals, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a huge week 2. We have seen Detroit give up some big passing days for wide receivers. Cooper Kupp was huge in week 1. Chris Godwin, pretty big last week. Even though they tried to put some money and some resources into that secondary, hasn't totally worked out. Do you like Harrison Jr. this week?
So he's led the team in snaps. He's led the team not led them in targets, but he's led them in snaps. So he's out there. They know he's their wide receiver 1. His game is different than Cooper Kupp and Chris Godwin. And so there is a potential that, if he gets Terry and Arnold on him, who's been a penalty machine, something could happen. Arnold is learning. He's had to go to school, and he's learning the difference between playing cornerback in the NFL versus college. But if they're doubling up Harrison, then we got to hope Trey McBride and Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch kind of pull in some production and get them off Harrison. I think Harrison has a good game. I don't think we're going to see kind of the blast off like we did last week, though.
I am taking the Lions in this one.
So am I.
Next up, Sunday Night Football, Kansas City Chiefs 2-0 at the 1-1 Atlanta Falcons. Isaiah Pacheco is gone on IR. They said Kareem Hunt will not play this week, though he was signed to the practice squad. That means it is Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. How do you think that's going to go?
I think Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the ball a lot.
Atlanta has a somewhat decent secondary, though.
Yeah, but he's got Carson Steele and Samaje Perine back there with him. So, Steele is one of these folk hero Gardner Minshew-ish kind of stories. He's a guy that plays hard. He's going to do the right thing, and maybe he'll be productive. He flashed a little bit in preseason. He's going to run hard. That's what you're going to get. Perine, he's good in pass protection, good at catching the ball. Not as powerful as you would expect a 5'9", 235-pound back to be. But he's gonna play fundamentally well. But I think it's going to come down to Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. Will they be able to get that passing game going versus the Falcons? You know, the Falcons defense isn't playing too bad this year. But, you know, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. And I think looks like it'll be a game where it's going to be about 45 to 50 pass attempts and about 15 carries.
Meanwhile, for the Falcons, Kirk Cousins got off to a bit of a slow start, looked a little rough in week 1, but started to come around week 2. Great 2-minute drive to win Monday Night Football. How are you feeling about him in week 3?
He got more efficient in week 2. You know, week 1, it was 100% shotgun. I think both the coaches and him were a little nervous about, you know, getting back out there, pushing off on that repaired Achilles. I think in week 2, after, you know, he got hit a few times, and in week 1, I think he just kind of said, look, a big part of my game is being under center and doing play action. And I've got to try it and see if I can do it, because that's one of the things that makes me successful. And I think overall he performed pretty well. So they've got weapons in Bijan and Pitts and London. I just don't think they're going to be able to handle the Chiefs.
Yeah, I am taking the Chiefs as well. We have a double header on Monday Night Football. There are going to be several double headers on Monday Night Football this year. This is the first of back-to-back weeks where that will be the case. The first game is the 0-2 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 2-0 Buffalo Bills. Dennis, through 2 games, Trevor Lawrence, 26 of 51, just 51% completion percentage, only 382 yards, 1 touchdown, no INTs, 2 losses. How are you feeling about Trevor Lawrence?
You know, maybe he's just not as good as his prospect profile said. And maybe he's just a good NFL quarterback. Maybe he's not transcendent, otherworldly. You know, maybe he's just slightly better than Derek Carr. Maybe he's
that sound you heard as Jags fans going out drinking, remembering that he's getting $55 million a year.
It's, you know, he's got a lot of tools to work with. But it just is, you know, coaching changes and offense changes and stuff, and it's just not coming together for him. Maybe it will later this season. And he's, you know, Brian Thomas Jr. looks great. Getting Evan Ingram back is going to be helpful if he can get healthy. You know, Christian Kirk needs to get right. That hasn't happened. And Travis Etienne, you know, needs to start putting up big games as well. Hopefully it kind of starts to gel a little bit and they can move forward. You know, if not, I think we're going to hear Doug Peterson's name in the hat for first to be canned.
I don't know if I think he'll get canned, but maybe a little bit on the hot seat, because, you know, he looked real good in turning Lawrence around at the beginning, but they have not been great as a team. Meanwhile, for the Bills, they have not been a robust pass offense either. That's been somewhat by design, but Khalil Shakir kind of stepping up, has led the team in targets, has caught all 8 of those for 96 yards and a touchdown. Now, I know you're going to say 8 of 8, you know, catching everything that's thrown to you is not sustainable, but are you liking what you're seeing with Shakir?
I do like what I see with Shakir. It feels like Josh Allen has got trust with him. And that could very well be just because he's the guy that's been there the longest. But, I mean, he's sitting at wide receiver 30. I think it's hard to expect any Bills wide receiver to really be much higher than that in any given week, given that they're just not throwing the ball that much. They're going to spread it around with Kincaid and Keon Coleman eventually, and Shakir and Curtis Samuel. James Cook. I think if I wanted to roster any piece outside of Josh Allen in this offense, I think it's James Cook.
Yeah, I like Shakir as a decent flex kind of option, but it's still hard to tell. Shakir didn't have a huge week 1, had a huge week 2, but we saw Coleman have like a big week 1 and disappear off the face of the earth in week 2. And Dalton Kincaid's just hanging around. So I'm with you. We have not totally seen. And if they can build a decent lead on the Jaguars, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, we may not see a lot of passing Monday night either. I am taking the Bills.
So am I.
Final Monday night game of the week is the 1-1 Washington Commanders at the 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals. Who would have thought of these two teams, the only one with a win would be the Commanders. Terry McLaurin has seen 12 targets. That's good. He's caught 8, which is a good percentage, but for only 39 yards. Ooh. How are you feeling about him going into this one?
He's 29th in targets in the NFL, and it isn't like he's got A.J. Brown on the other side. You know, it isn't like
Noah Brown on the other side.
Cooper and Puka Nacua. It's not J-Mo and Amon-Ra or Godwin and Evans. You know, you've got to get him targets. But he's got a 4.9 yards per reception average, and he's got 4.36 speed. He's a route running technician. It's malpractice what they're doing with him. You've got to get him downfield. You got to get the ball in his hands in space and let him use those gifts that he has. And they're just not doing it yet. So hopefully, you know, it starts to turn around.
Meanwhile, on the other side, Jamar Chase wanted a contract, didn't get a contract, has been on the field, but it hasn't been great. 10 receptions for 97 yards through 2 games, has fewer targets and less yardage than Mike Gesicki as a receiver, and had a real blow up on the field at the end of last week's game. Doesn't seem too happy. Are you at all worried about Chase?
Nah. Especially in this game, Washington gives up the most fantasy points to wide receivers, 4th most receptions, 5th most yards, most touchdowns. This should be a get-right game for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
It'd be a get-right game for Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. Just watch. I'm with you, though. I'm hoping that Chase will bounce back. Sometimes we've seen him get frustrated and it's kind of sparked something in him. Let's hope, at home on Monday Night Football, the Bengals need a win. I am going with the Bengals in this one.
So am I. Looks like another week we only have one difference.
Well, that didn't work out well for either of us last week. So let's hope this week it's a really good sign.
I feel like
the Ravens Cowboys, I think, was the only one we had different.
Yeah.
And I was really on the fence. I was on the fence with that, and I was on the fence with Eagles Saints. But we'll see how the NFC East holds up for me. I can't believe I bet on Mike McCarthy over John Harbaugh.
I got a trade question for you.
Yeah.
So I have a team. I'm a contender. I think if I remember correctly, I think I might have actually won last year. Superflex. I got Christian McCaffrey and Isaiah Pacheco. And my quarterbacks are Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott. And I'm thinking I want to get another running back, and I'm okay trading away Burrow or Prescott if I get a quarterback back. Geno is my 3rd quarterback, not that I'm counting on him. So I've been going back and forth with Swagzilla OG. He's in the league, and we've been, he put Kyler Murray and Jonathan Taylor on the block. One of my building blocks on my team going forward, because I've got 1 draft pick in the next 2 years, and that's a 4th rounder. Mm-hmm. One of my building blocks is Nico Collins. He'd like to get Nico Collins. I think Kyler Murray is the better short-term play over Burrow. Like, I like him a lot this year. Him and Burrow and Murray are the same age. So as we've went back and forth, right now the latest offer is I would get Kyler Murray, Brandon Ayuk, and Jonathan Taylor. And I'd give up Joe Burrow, Nico Collins, and Deebo Samuel. I just don't know if I can give up Nico Collins.
Probably wouldn't do it. I mean, yeah, I probably wouldn't do it.
I want Taylor because I do have concerns about what's McCaffrey going to be like when he comes back. Is he really going to come back in 4 weeks? I think that's definitely something to be concerned about. So I've got McCaffrey and Pacheco on IR. My other running backs are Kyren Williams and Aaron Jones, Gus Edwards, Miles Sanders, Tank Bigsby. So I'm very weak. He's rebuilding, and so that's why I'm trying to trade. Like, I'm okay to trade Debo because he's going to be out. It'll help him with his draft pick.
What all receivers do you have?
Right, I got Chris Godwin, Nico Collins, Gabe Davis, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Debo, Van Jefferson, Mike Williams, Jalen Hyatt. So I've got decent depth, but I've got 3 guys out that are top tier guys.
I'd probably try to move a lesser piece to get more of a lower third RB, like maybe take a shot to see if somebody's ready to give up on Zamir White or on Zach Moss and hope that they pick it up, or shoot for Singletary because you're only looking to bridge the gap and have somebody who's playable. I don't know if I would try to go for a big.
I get it. I just, part of me feels like I could have Jonathan Taylor could be productive for about 2 or 3 more seasons, I think. And so I think that would put me in a good spot. I don't know.
It's still too early in the season to tell how they're meshing with Anthony Richardson back there, though, because they've literally played 2 games together in their entire career. And last week they were against a really porous rushing defense. He did better, but still only 103 yards. I don't think he's going to get a lot of passing work because there's not a lot of passing to go around. And week 1, when they were in that shootout game, Anthony Richardson ran for a lot and took rushing touchdowns, and poor Jonathan Taylor got a decent amount of carries and 48 yards.
Right.
I still like Jonathan Taylor, but I don't know that that's 100%. If you told me you were doing it and getting Breece Hall, I would have said okay. But Jonathan Taylor is a big enough name to warrant that trade, but we don't know enough about his situation.
Yeah, my inclination is to pass on it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, if you're listening, shoot us a message. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, and if you have other trade questions or lineup questions, be sure to post them. We will check it out. You can tag us on X, and we'll be looking for that. You can also find me on the Campus to Canton Discord. But going in, we have a quiet Friday night and then a big slate of games Sunday, Monday. If people are looking for something to fill their time, Dennis, what can they do?
They can go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell 2 friends, let them tell 2 friends, and them tell 2 friends, and them tell 2 friends, and them tell 2 friends.
Well, we will be back on Tuesday to recap all of week 3 and preview the Thursday night football game, and we'll be hoping against hope we aren't also talking about 10 or 20 more significant injuries. Until Tuesday, you guys have a wonderful football week.